Neo Exdeath is a great fight, not only the first final boss in mainline Final Fantasy to have multiple phases, a trend that would continue for the rest of the series, but his second phase has 4 targets to choose from. It's extremely easy to get overwhelmed your first few tries, so I've tried to make a solid guide on what each part does, how best to counter it, and hopefully it'll help you not get hard-walled by him if you get there with a terrible 4-job Fiesta party. I'll do this beginning with the first phase before Neo proper, then after I'll give some general advice for Neo, and after that I'll start from the upper right segment and go clockwise. The Final Fantasy wiki page for Neo calls these parts front, top, middle, and back, and while I'm not a fan of that classification, I'll use those terms too for those that might use this guide in tandem with that page. Exdeath in his tree form can potentially do a bunch of crazy moves to you, but 90% of the time he's just gonna spam White Hole, which instantly kills and petrifies the target. In pre-Pixel Remaster versions, being immune to one or the other gives you total immunity of the move, so pass around those ribbons and Aegis shields. Maybe even use that bone mail if you have White Wind. He's level 77 with 49,000 health, and the lower he gets, the more straight up damaging spells he does, and in my experience that means a lot of Holy below half health and a lot of Meteor at near death. Try and buff up at the very start as best you can with whatever you have, be it your standard White Mage Fair, regen, bard songs, level mixes, and then deplete that HP as quickly as your party can muster. If someone dies right before Neo, then you're gonna seriously struggle getting them back in the game without something like Quick or Dual Cast. Everyone at least being alive at the end of this phase is 1,000 times more preferable, even if they're at critical health. Otherwise, you're just going into Neo permanently on the back foot. A couple general tips before the specifics. First, do not let one segment be alive by itself for too long. While each part has its own unique abilities and acts once per part, as soon as just one is left alive, it gains access to every move, gets a couple new ones like Meteor, again, and starts acting twice per turn. Spamming party damage like summons, throwing scrolls, Akka magic, anything like that will not steer you wrong, although not every part has equal HP. The lowest HP a part has is 50,000, with the highest being 60,000, so pretty close comparatively, but if your 4-job Fiesta party lacks multi-target damage, you might have to bring out a calculator if you want to be absolutely safe. Additionally, all parts are vulnerable to blind, poison, silence, and stop. The former two can be legitimate assets. Silence is unlikely to be any help at all due to 3 of the 4 parts being heavy, meaning it'll last maybe 2 seconds before wearing off, and this is the kind of game that's hard to tell if silencing a boss would do anything anyway. Like, is Almagest magic? Grand Cross? If they are, then perfectly timing Silence Blade against a segment to save your team from destruction adds another skill shot to the list of the game, bringing the count up to 2. While Stop will similarly only last a fraction of a turn, it still resets a target's ATB gauge, meaning you can buy more time before the next Almagest or Delta attack. I wouldn't count on the Bard's Stop song to be pulling much weight, but with a big level increase, it might work once or twice. Poison can do some serious damage though. This is like maybe the only fight in the game that it's worth going for, but all this debuff talk really feels kind of moot because the level difference is so stacked against you. The lowest level for any part is 67, which is just unfortunate in its own right, but the other 3 are in the 80s, so without a Mystic Knight for a guaranteed Poison Blade or a Chemist or Bard to bump up your own level, status is hard to justify the turns for. I'll still mention what the individual parts are weak to though, because you never know. The front target, I would say, is your lowest priority. It has the least amount of HP at 50,000 and only uses regular attacks with the Vacuum Wave as its signature move. Those attacks do hit extremely hard, but Protect is easier to have access to compared to most buffs. The Golem Summon can totally neutralize it for several turns and is accessible to every party because it comes from the Magic Lamp, and Blind will impact this one more than the other 3 given you can actually land it. It's level 81, 1, which is really high for the sake of your spell accuracy, but for this part it means that a single Dark Spark will put it immediately into level 5 death territory. This is also one of the 2 segments that's vulnerable to slow, but with that level I personally don't think the turns are worth spending on trying. Other than that, nothing is very exploitable. Its only attribute is heavy, and its rare steel is the Murakumo. Technically the strongest katana, but the Masamune is infinitely better. I guess you could use it if you have a dual-wielding samurai. The middle segment is, in my experience, the most dangerous and should be priority target number 1 for any party. This one is the lowest level, by a lot actually, but that does not impact the danger factor at all. Its signature move is Almagest, and without shell or any way to neutralize the damage, your party is taking a clean 14 to 1800, potentially wiping any job that's mage adjacent and leaving the rest at death's door. What makes this worse is that between all the signature moves, Almagest is the most likely to come out first within a minute or 2 into the fight, telegraphed by him beginning to shake extremely violently. Its critical weakness is Break. If you have Mystic Knight but no access to Shell, Break Blade this one right away. I know what I said about spread the damage around, but I make an exception for a party attack that does 6,000 damage cumulatively. Trying the Black Mage's Break spell with some level boosters is a good substitute. I've made that work myself in the past, but the accuracy is seriously skewed against you even in the best case scenario. This part is also vulnerable to Old, which I've never done before. I didn't even know that until making this video. I'm curious how neutered Almagest can be when brought down to level 1. Still deadly, I'm sure. Finally, along with naturally being heavy, it's also classified as a magic beast, meaning all else failing, you can shoot at it with the Artemis bow and go to town with the Beast Killer for major damage. The steel, which is a common steel actually, is a Fuma Shuriken. Cool? The back part is weird. It has the most HP with 60,000. Its signature move is Delta Attack, which is a very weak, reflectable attack that petrifies the target. It has the highest level at 86. It's the other segment that has a slow weakness, and most importantly, it lacks a heavy flag. Many 4-job Fiesta parties eschew fighting this part at all, and just run the magic lamp down to Odin for the guaranteed Zantetsuken kill, myself included. But I think gunning for that right away isn't always the best play. I said leaving one segment alive has the possibility of disaster, and if you can tolerate being stoned a few times, I think leaving it until it's the last one, then lamping it to finish is a good strategy if you're not confident in keeping track of HP values. Other details include actually being a back row target, even if it's the only segment remaining, so frontliners will struggle a bit making progress on it. Being an even level, so level 2 Old has some potential. Having the best weapon in the game and knight-only sword Ragnarok as its rare steel, and having the human attribute, so the Man-Eater can... Alright, if you're using the Man-Eater on the final boss, shut the hell up. Finally, the top part, which I'd say is a close second to the middle in terms of danger. 55,000 health, level 83, heavy and dragon type, with the signature move being Grand Cross, a seizure-inducing ability that sticks random debuffs on your party. It could be anything, from poison to zombie, so if you don't have ribbons, you're almost certainly gonna get hit with some kind of bullshit. The dragon attribute gives use to the Dragon Spear, which is also this thing's rare steel, Dragon Whisker, or even the Apollo's Harp if your bard is out for blood. Don't sleep on this harp, it could do some real work with equip harps. Lastly, it's the sole part vulnerable to Paralyze. Usually I wouldn't care about this at all, but I did get a comment on my updated tier list video saying that Mind Blast Paralysis is a fantastic way to lock down this segment while the rest of the party works on the rest of the boss. As mentioned a few paragraphs ago, turn denial debuffs like Stop and Paralyze might only last a couple seconds, but they still reset the target's ATB gauge when it wears off. I assume this means that the Paralyze from Mind Blast is guaranteed and not a chance to happen like most of the whips, so you know, I'll give it up to Mind Blast. Since Blue Magic is constantly struggling for relevancy, any little tidbit helps. So as always, make sure to check the comments for any good advice I missed or neglected. I'm curious how many people would agree with me on this, but I feel that Neo Exdeath is the first great final boss in the mainline series. Chaos and the Emperor are solid, with both having a wide array of suitably dangerous moves, but the former suffers from a low HP pool versus the party's damage output, in NES anyway, and the latter suffering from Blood Sword Exists-itis. 3 and 4's final bosses are terrible. Cloud of Darkness is an HP check that requires you spam Curaja every turn and hope you grind it enough to outpace her spammed every turn Particle Beam / Flare Wave. And while Zeromus has a wider move pool, it still ultimately comes down to wait for Rosa's turn to come up, wait for him to use Big Bang, use Curaja. I'm glad that Neo was a turning point for Final Fantasy final bosses. They might not always be the most challenging, but just be glad we don't have any more dark clouds for the foreseeable future.